Henrietta, our daughter-in-law, loudly said that elderly folks like us, being of a different class, shouldn't come to the housewarming party. We were shocked by her audacity and couldn't find words to respond. I had kept silent for our eldest son Warren's sake. But Henrietta's disrespectful attitude reached my limit. My husband Reagan and I exchanged glances, nodded in agreement, and told Henrietta that we understood. Satisfied, she smiled and went back to Warren. I am Bridget, 73 years old, and Warren is our son with Reagan. Warren was always quiet but started to assert himself in college. He introduced us to the woman he was seriously dating, and we happily consented to their marriage. Around 3 years into their marriage, during Christmas, Warren and his wife were coming home for the first time. I was excited to spend time with Henrietta. When they arrived, Henrietta initially seemed shy but gradually relaxed. As it got dark, I stood up to prepare dinner, and Henrietta offered to help in the kitchen. While we were in the kitchen, an unfamiliar voice, lower and harsher than usual, said, "It's cold. This house is too cold." I turned towards Henrietta in disbelief, and she was rubbing her hands together with discontent. In an unhappy tone, she expressed her dislike for old houses and complained about Warren insisting they come. Stunned, I was speechless as Henrietta vented her bad mood at me. She even made a disparaging comment, suggesting my appearance was all an act to get married. "I'm tired of waiting. Hurry up and get ready." "I'm hungry," said Henrietta, seemingly annoyed by my stunned silence. She gestured towards the stove and spoke dismissively. I hurried to obey, probably more shaken than I realized. Once I started moving, Henrietta did nothing but dictate, not lifting a finger to help. She complained about everything, criticized my methods, yet did nothing herself. By the time the preparations were done, and it was just a matter of serving the food, Henrietta suddenly became active, charming Reagan and Warren, and blushing at their praise. It was then I finally understood this was Henrietta's true nature. 10 years later, Warren and his wife were returning for a visit. Henrietta had shown her true colors many times, but only in my presence. She never behaved that way in front of Reagan or Warren. I had kept silent, thinking it might be a misunderstanding, but the same things happened every time they visited, confirming my suspicions. Hearing they were coming back, I felt a bit downhearted. While planning to avoid being alone with Henrietta as much as possible, the doorbell rang. Sighing, I opened the door to find Warren standing alone. Surprised not to see Henrietta, I involuntarily looked around for her. Warren, noticing my reaction, spoke with a hint of apology. "Sorry, Mom. Henrietta had some urgent work and will join us later. She said it's okay to go ahead with the grave visit without her." It seemed Henrietta wouldn't be joining until her work was finished, and I felt a sense of relief at the thought of not having to witness Henrietta's behavior, even for a little while. I welcomed Warren into the house, and Reagan, who was in the living room, noticed Henrietta's absence and asked about her. While preparing tea, I found myself sighing deeply without realizing it. We decided to relax for the day and postpone the grave visit to the next day. When Warren informed Henrietta, she responded, "Understood, but I still can't finish my work and come over, so please apologize to the others for me." Reagan laughed it off as unavoidable, but I couldn't help feeling that Henrietta just didn't want to attend the grave visit. However, I couldn't voice such thoughts, so I just said not to worry about it, and we spent the day uneventfully. The next day, after finishing visiting the grave and relaxing at home, Henrietta called, saying, "Finally finished with work, so I'll be heading over tonight." The timing of her call right after the grave visit seemed a bit off to Reagan and Warren too, hastening my suspicion. That evening, just as we were about to have dinner, Henrietta arrived. She appeared a bit sweaty and out of breath, as if she had rushed. I frowned involuntarily, but Reagan and Warren were so pleased to see her that I decided not to say anything. Henrietta, having been freed from work, was told to take a shower first while dinner was being prepared. She replied somewhat apologetically. When she emerged from the bathroom at dinner time, she muttered upon seeing the food on the tray, "Sandwiches, that's it? After a hot day at the grave, I'm tired of eating this." I managed to avoid going to someone else's grave in this heat, and all I get is a simple meal. Henrietta tied up her hair and walked towards the living room. I felt angry but couldn't find the words to confront her. In the living room, she instantly started chatting happily with Regan, leaving me silently frustrated. Another 10 years passed, and Warren decided to move from his apartment to a house. After discussing it with Henrietta, they decided to pay as much down payment as possible themselves, but asked us for a little help with the shortfall. We couldn't refuse our dear Warren's request, so we immediately agreed and transferred the needed amount. Soon after, Warren informed us that their new house was built, and they planned the housewarming party with both families. I hadn't seen Henrietta's parents since the wedding, so I eagerly agreed to attend, considering everything that had happened. Warren was delighted with my response and immediately shared the news with Henrietta, who I imagined was on the other end of the phone. Thus, we were set to attend the housewarming party next month. A few days after this was decided, Henrietta unexpectedly visited alone. I was surprised by her unannounced visit and opened the door without realizing it was her. Looking up, I saw Henrietta with an unhappy expression, and I was taken aback. "I'll come in." Henrietta quickly checked for keys in the entrance and pushed past me to enter the house. Her arrogant behavior continued as she walked into the living room, probably because she noticed that Regan's keys weren't in the entrance. Indeed, Regan was out for his daily walk and wouldn't be back for a while. Taking advantage of this, Henrietta had barged into our home. Feeling trapped, I followed her into the living room where she waited for me without sitting down. Before I could even close the door, Henrietta glared at me and said, "Bridget, you're planning to come to the housewarming party. It's a nuisance, so can you please not come?" Surprised, I responded, "What are you suddenly talking about? Regan wasn't there, so Henrietta," crossing her arms, started speaking in a high-handed manner. "You're planning to tattle to my parents about me, aren't you?" Henrietta glared at me with evident disgust, clearly not wanting her parents to know about her behavior. She must have specifically chosen a time when Warren was working, and she had a day off, knowing about Regan's routine walk, and had timed her visit accordingly. Henrietta was cunning indeed. Calmly, I replied, "I had no such intention, but now that you mention it, it might not be a bad idea." Henrietta frowned in annoyance, saying, "It's no joke. I married Warren because he's good-looking and earns decently. I don't want to deal with annoying relatives revealing." Henrietta's expression froze when she realized I had caught on to the true reason for marrying Warren. As I worried about her strange behavior, the living room door opened behind me. Turning around, I saw Regan, who looked surprised as he gazed at Henrietta, realizing that her conversation with me had been overheard. Henrietta clicked her tongue but decided to brazen it out, telling us the real reason. "Elderly folks like you, being of a different class, shouldn't come to the housewarming party." We were astounded by her audacity, at a loss for words. I reached my limit with Henrietta, daring to say such things even in Warren's absence. I had kept silent for Warren's sake until now, but I could no longer overlook such behavior. My husband Regan seemed to share my sentiment. At her utterly disrespectful attitude, we exchanged glances, nodded in agreement, and said to Henrietta, "Understood." Satisfied, she smiled and went back to Warren. Left behind, we felt suddenly very tired and sat down on the sofa. On the day of the housewarming party, we didn't go to Warren and his wife's home. We hadn't told Warren anything about the incident with Henrietta. Naturally, he must have thought we were coming. By now, Warren and his wife might be panicking. Sipping coffee with Regan at a cafe, I pondered this. Then Regan's mobile phone rang. He got up, answered the call, and stepped out of the cafe. I quickly paid the bill and followed him out, getting into the car. Regan switched the phone to speaker mode so I could hear Warren's voice too. "Dad, something strange is happening. All my relatives have suddenly got other plans, and you and Mom haven't arrived yet. Even Henrietta's relatives are canceling one after another. What's going on?" Feeling guilty about Warren's anxious tone but deciding to play dumb, we exchanged glances. Who knows what Henrietta's saying? Reagan asked, sounding casual. His acting was so natural that it surprised me. Noticing my reaction, Regan winked and gestured to keep it a secret. I had to stifle a laugh, covering my mouth. Henrietta is also confused. Oh, another call's coming in. I'll call back later. Be safe, coming over. Warren still seemed to expect our visit, making me feel remorseful. But I convinced myself it was necessary to get back at Henrietta. Then my mobile phone rang. It was a relative who was supposed to attend today's party. Feeling sorry but chatting for a bit, I was engaged in a long conversation with a talkative relative when Regan's phone rang again. It was Warren. Regan switched to speaker mode and answered, "Dad, I just spoke to Henrietta's mom. What's going on? If you can still come, please do right away." Warren's voice, sounding close to tears, made me feel a tightness in my chest. Regan looked at me with furrowed brows. After I nodded at Regan, he reassured Warren. "Understood. We'll be right there. Calm down." With that, Warren, sounding relieved, hung up. We who were at a cafe near Warren's new home drove towards his place. Upon arriving and ringing the doorbell, Warren rushed out to greet us. Behind him, Henrietta glared at us with furious eyes. Once inside, Warren ushered us to the living room, waiting for us to sit on the sofa. Eagerly, he asked, "I didn't expect you to arrive so soon. Where were you? What's going on?" All our relatives are angry. Henrietta's relatives are apologizing, and I have no idea what's happening. Calm down, Warren. First of all, congratulations on your new home. I'll explain everything now, I said to calm him down. I turned to Henrietta, who was silently sitting. You know why we're the only ones here, don't you, Henrietta? What do you mean? Henrietta feigned ignorance, prompting me to sigh lightly before starting. It seems you don't want us here, but given the current situation, your worries are gone, aren't they? Didn't want us here. What does that mean? Warren sounded confused. I smiled slightly and continued. Both your relatives and ours know everything now. Unfortunately, your plans have failed. You've already been reprimanded by your relatives, haven't you? A low growl unmistakably from Henrietta was heard. Ignoring this, I continued, looking straight at Henrietta. Given Warren's reaction now, you've been pretending to be good ever since you were dating him. Now that your true nature is exposed, why don't you just accept it? I didn't invite you. Her voice, now much quieter than before, made Warren lean in closer to hear her. She repeated, I didn't invite you. I told you not to come. Why did you come anyway and spread lies among the relatives, framing me? Is that fun for you? Taken aback by her intensity, Warren recoiled. I sighed at Henrietta, still insisting she was the victim. Mobile phones are so handy, aren't they, Henrietta? I nodded at Reagan. He took out his phone, operated it, and then looked at Warren. I just wanted to marry Warren because he's good-looking and earns decently. I don't want to deal with troublesome relatives. Anyway, elderly folks like you, being of a different class, shouldn't come to the housewarming party. Henrietta's words from that day played from Regan's mobile phone. Henrietta turned pale and looked at Warren. After the playback, Warren turned slowly to Henrietta, his mouth agape. Henrietta tried to deny it, but what excuse could she give after that recording? The weather turned bad, so I cut my walk short and came back only to hear this incredible conversation. I couldn't help but record it. Glad it was useful, Regan said regretfully. Warren looked at me for confirmation, and I nodded firmly. I couldn't believe it at first either, Warren, but the truth is there in the recording. Henrietta's true feelings and her last words were said despite my presence. It's hard to escape now. Regan fixed his gaze on Henrietta, questioning how anyone could stay calm knowing she had been deceiving everyone since her dating days with Warren, let alone after their marriage. Seeing his look, Henrietta dropped her shoulders and ceased her struggle. This seemed like an affirmation to Warren, who abruptly stood up and left the house. It happened so suddenly that we couldn't stop him. And although Regan hurried after him, he soon returned. Apparently, Warren had driven off somewhere, leaving his mobile phone behind, making it impossible for us to call him. Henrietta, left behind and surrounded by us, sat trembling and pale, huddled up. As time passed helplessly, Warren eventually returned, holding something in his hand, which he slammed in front of Henrietta, saying quietly, "Sign the divorce papers and leave." Henrietta looked up at Warren, her mouth agape, but Warren repeated himself, took a pen from the holder on the table, and began to fill in his part. After finishing, he forced the pen into Henrietta's hand and tapped on the divorce papers. "Come on, sign, and leave." Overwhelmed, Henrietta, though frightened, filled in her part. She looked at Warren when finished, but he, without making eye contact, was checking for any missing details. Finding no errors, he forcefully made Henrietta stand up and dragged her to the front door. He then pushed Henrietta out of the house, ignoring her attempts to cling to him and throwing her bag outside. "It's late, so I'll submit this tomorrow. Don't ever come back to this property," he said, slamming the door shut and locking it. Henrietta's pleading voice could be heard from outside, but Warren ignored it and turned to apologize to us. "I'm sorry for the trouble. I had no idea she was like that." We could say nothing to his deep apology, just embracing him. Before long, Henrietta's voice faded away. We decided to stay at Warren's new home that night. The next morning, Warren submitted the divorce paper first thing, and his divorce from Henrietta was finalized. Concerned about his heartache, we chose to stay another night. And that evening, with a somewhat calmer Warren, we discussed everything that had happened. As we recounted the past events, Warren listened with clenched fists. Regan, who was also unaware of these details, placed his hand on my shoulder as I spoke. Then we revealed the truth about the current situation. After Henrietta had left, telling us not to come, I learned that Regan had spontaneously recorded the conversation. We decided together to inform Henrietta's parents. When we called and explained the situation, Henrietta's parents, initially in disbelief, changed their attitude and kept apologizing. After hearing the recorded audio, angry about their daughter's misdeeds, they intended to tell the relatives who had planned to attend the housewarming party not to go. After hanging up, we discussed and decided to do the same with our relatives. They too were furious and said they wouldn't attend. That is how the current situation unfolded. Hearing all this, Warren's shoulders drooped again, worried but unable to do anything. We decided to spend another night. The next day, Warren came into the living room, looking relieved, and shared what happened the previous night. He had apparently contacted his former in-laws. Henrietta was now at her parents' home, being disowned and facing eviction. They also planned to bring alimony, which would be imposed on Henrietta as her debt. While Warren felt this was not enough, he seemed more settled than expected. After returning home, we immediately started packing up our old house. Now dated, it was set to be handed over. The house was actually being remodeled for us to live in together. Since Warren was at work during the day, the renovations were to take place. Though costly to modify a newly built home, with some financial gain from the recent events and our help, the decision was made. While waiting for the house's remodeling, we were happily clearing out our old home. My name is Susan, and currently I find myself balancing a demanding career while raising my only son, Ethan. Despite getting married, my passion for work has not waned. As the president of a small company, I had no concerns about a salary cut upon returning from maternity leave, thanks to a reliable team handling my business during the hectic times of childcare. However, there is another issue weighing heavily on my mind, something more personal and challenging. It revolves around my mother-in-law, Dorothy, my husband, James, our son, Ethan, and I live in a house. Ever since my father-in-law passed away, Dorothy moved in with us. Initially, we thought it would be temporary, but Dorothy showed no signs of leaving. One day, I mustered the courage to ask Dorothy, "How long do you plan to stay with us?" In a dramatized manner, she raised her voice and began to cry, accusing me of trying to kick her out. I was taken aback by her reaction, feeling a mix of surprise and confusion. James, who overheard our conversation, rushed to Dorothy's side and comforted her. After Dorothy stopped crying, James asked her to go to her room, leaving me alone. He immediately glared at me and accused me of being cold to his mother. I clarified that I didn't intend to tell her to leave, but James interpreted my inquiry differently, concluding that I was in the wrong. Reluctantly, I backed down, wrestling with my thoughts about Dorothy staying for an extended period. I was curious about when she would leave but felt unable to ask directly due to the fear of emotional repercussions. Dorothy behaved as though the house were her own, showing little regard for my comfort. One unexpected day, she made a startling announcement. She decided to relinquish her ancestral home and transfer all her belongings to my house. A moving truck driven by Steve, a friendly but straightforward mover, pulled up in front of their house. I was speechless with astonishment, my mouth agape in disbelief. On that day, supposed to be special for Ethan with a planned family outing to the amusement park, James disrupted the plans by declaring it a day for unpacking. Ethan, anticipating the amusement park visit, glanced between me and James with a near-tearful expression, seeking reassurance about their plans. I found myself comforting my son in the midst of the unexpected changes. I reassured Ethan, "Don't worry, Ethan, we'll definitely go to the amusement park." However, James frowned, questioning, "Are we really going to play instead of unpacking?" I firmly responded that a family trip to the amusement park had been a long-standing plan, emphasizing that breaking a promise to our child for unpacking was unthinkable. I stood my ground, believing in the righteousness of my stance. The planned visit to the amusement park had been set over a month in advance. We had prepared various things and were looking forward to spending this day as a family. Spending time together was crucial for us. Yet, it was a complete surprise to hear that my mother-in-law was suddenly moving into our house. Moreover, being told that today was the day for unpacking left us bewildered. I prioritized our family plans above all. It's my policy to cherish the bond with my family. However, my mother-in-law reacted emotionally to my decision, crying excessively and claiming, "Susan doesn't want to live with me. That's why she's prioritized her own child over me." Steve, the mover, realizing the conversation wasn't progressing, asked, "Well, unpacking can be done anytime. Isn't keeping a promise with your family more important? Also, did you actually inform your daughter-in-law about the move?" Perhaps embarrassed by Steve's rational words, my mother-in-law's face turned red. My husband, James, just glared at me, uncertain of how to react. It seemed he preferred to prioritize packing for his mother over going to the amusement park with our son. Nevertheless, I took Ethan's hand and headed to the park as promised, creating a clear rift between my husband and me. One day, my mother-in-law casually broached the subject. "Hey, Susan, could you possibly stay home this upcoming weekend?" Seemingly oblivious to any plans I might have already made, a surge of irritation welled up inside me. Yet I strived to maintain composure in my response. "Why do you ask?" I inquired, striving to mask my annoyance with a tone of neutrality. She expressed her desire to spend quality time with Ethan, claiming that I was always around him, making it unfair for her. It was apparent she had eavesdropped on my earlier conversation about a mall outing plan with Ethan for the next weekend. She began to assert that I should avoid joining them at the mall, suggesting a scenario where James, Ethan, and herself would go, leaving me to oversee the house alone. I responded, "If you're keen on visiting the mall, why don't we all go together?" I suggested, hoping to strike a balance and not let Ethan out of my sight, especially not with Dorothy, whose trustworthiness had been in question since the day I witnessed her faint tears. Dorothy's expression morphed into a mix of reluctance and disappointment. She was jarred by my proposition. Voicing her displeasure was not an option, and with evident reluctance, she nodded in agreement, conceding to the new plan. At the shopping mall, I was selecting clothes for my son, Ethan, just as I had planned. Recognizing that children grow up fast, I picked out slightly larger sizes. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, Dorothy, came over and said, "Don't you know his size?" This size would fit Ethan perfectly. She had chosen a size that fit Ethan just right for the moment. I tried to explain that kids grow quickly, and it's better to have a bit of room in their clothes. However, Dorothy quickly retorted, "When he grows, just buy new ones. Don't be so stingy. I was internally taken aback by her attitude. Continuously buying perfectly fitting clothes would be a waste of money, and our family budget couldn't afford such frequent purchases. I resisted. But then my husband, James, intervened, saying, I'm paying the bills. If you're stingy, it reflects poorly on me. Ultimately, James paid for the clothes Dorothy had picked out. Afterward, Ethan wore those clothes for a while. But in just a few months, he started complaining that they were too tight and stopped wearing them. Dorothy saw this, and her face showed a mix of emotions, a complicated blend of realization and disappointment. Deciding to sort out the unnecessary clothes overflowing in our home, many of which were no longer in use, I chose to give them to a mother friend of mine whom I got close to at the daycare center attached to our company. She was delighted to receive them, and seeing her joy warmed my heart. However, my use of this daycare center seemed to be something my mother-in-law couldn't come to terms with. She didn't try to hide her critical attitude towards me, challenging me with a stern tone. Why would you leave Ethan with someone else when I'm right here at home and working while having a child? That's detrimental to his upbringing. Her words pierced deeply into my heart, but I felt the need to firmly state my position. Actually, I need to work too, or our finances wouldn't make ends meet, I replied. Yet, with a firm resolve, my mother-in-law further criticized me, saying, just how much do you think your earnings amount to? I'm sure James brings home much more than you, so you wouldn't need to work for us to live comfortably. You must be incompetent at your job, she accused. Her words deeply scarred me, and at that moment, I wondered if James had ever mentioned to her that I was the president of our company. Frustrated with this realization, I felt the need to find a new way to navigate this complex relationship with my mother-in-law. I actually earn more than James, mother-in-law, I said, my voice laced with a mix of confidence and a hint of sarcasm. Little did I know this remark was about to ignite a fiery response from Dorothy, my mother-in-law. How dare you speak like that, daughter-in-law? Dorothy raised her voice, a blend of shock and anger seeping through her words. To openly undermine your husband is unforgivable. Not only does she barely manage to care for our child, but she also has James assist with the household chores. And now she boasts about earning more than her husband. Can't she even show the slightest respect for him? James wouldn't struggle a bit without you around. Dorothy's voice grew louder, filling the room with her indignation. Hearing the commotion, James entered the room, a look of concern etched on his face. What's going on? He asked, sensing his son's presence as a form of support. Dorothy continued with even more vigor. Tell me, James, you don't meet Susan, do you? If it were just you, me, and Ethan, we could live happily. This woman's presence only makes our lives more constrained, doesn't it? James, slightly taken aback, responded hesitantly. Ah well. His lackluster replies seemed to fuel Dorothy's resolve. Then let's go for a divorce, she exclaimed, retrieving a divorce form from the shelf. It appeared that Dorothy had been harboring the intention of suggesting a divorce to me and James all along. Internally grappling with the turmoil, I came to the realization that I no longer needed a husband who prioritized his mother over his own family. However, I was determined not to give up custody. James shouted angrily, "Everything about you is unbearable. You are no longer needed in our family of three," his voice trembling with anger, symbolizing the collapse of our years-long marriage. Longing for freedom from this house, or rather this relationship, I responded calmly, "I understand, James." With a steady hand, I signed the divorce papers, marking the end of our relationship. Our family consisted of me, my husband James, and our grown son Ethan. However, ever since my mother-in-law Dorothy moved in, the tension in our home had been escalating. Disregarding our plans, Dorothy forced me to help her unpack her belongings, ruining Ethan and my eagerly awaited trip to the amusement park. When I began preparing for the move, she abruptly took James on a hot spring vacation. Ethan had been invited, but having witnessed her mistreatment towards me, he declined, preferring to stay with me. He was still upset about how Dorothy nearly canceled our amusement park plans. Respecting Ethan's decision, James and Dorothy left for their trip, leaving us behind. During their absence, I packed only mine and Ethan's belongings and had them transported by the mover, Steve. In my decisive letter, I informed James that he would be responsible for the $4,000 monthly rent for this house henceforth. I also mentioned hiring a lawyer for the custody battle and property division. Leaving the letter on the table, Ethan and I stepped into our new life. Upon their return from the week-long hot spring vacation, James and Dorothy contacted me immediately over the phone. James exclaimed, "Susan, did you really take Ethan with you? Mom is upset. Shouldn't I have custody?" His voice was a mix of anger and surprise. Realizing he hadn't read the letter I left, I asked James gently, "Could you please read the letter I left on the living room table?" The living room, a space she had designed with great care, radiated warmth. He harbored serious concerns about the content of the letter. If it's that letter, Mom said she'd check it first. And she's already read it?" James responded, a bit bewildered, often taking his mother, Dorothy's word for everything. I explained the contents of the letter. "It says that you will be responsible for the $4,000 monthly rent of this house going forward. It also states that I won't give up custody of Ethan. And regarding the division of property, I'll contact you after hiring a lawyer." $4,000, James exclaimed in shock, standing frozen. He was aware of the rental status of their home, but had not grasped the actual amount. His cavalier attitude towards financial management had always been a source of stress for me. This house was a rental costing about $4,000 monthly, which I had initially opposed living in. However, James had been adamant about this house, throwing a fit in an unbelievable manner, and I eventually gave in, with him pushing the responsibility of paying the rent entirely onto me. I found myself shouldering the burden of paying the monthly rent, which amounted to approximately $4,000, while James was expected to handle other living expenses. However, James had a habit of spending money without planning, often leaving me to cover the bills. This lack of financial responsibility extended to his mother, Dorothy, who frequently miscalculated her expenses and would call me over at the checkout when she realized she didn't have enough money. I was deeply disappointed with their inability to manage money. James would spend on his hobbies and desires before prioritizing living expenses, leaving me exhausted from his financial oversights. I had contributed my entire salary to the household for a long time, leaving me with very little for myself and making life extremely challenging. Recently, the burden intensified with increased expenses for Dorothy's food and allowance. The prospect of divorce meant shedding the hefty $4,000 monthly rent. Fortunately, the house was in James's name, sparing me from future responsibilities toward him and Dorothy. However, when I asked James to continue paying, he exclaimed, "Why should I pay? I don't live there anymore, and we're divorced. Dorothy even told me to leave the house, so I have no obligation to pay rent." In desperation, James pleaded for my help, but Dorothy intervened, confidently declaring, "Even without you, we can manage the rent. The amount you paid is nothing for James." I was flabbergasted, knowing that James, with a net income of around $2,000 and hardly any savings, could not afford the rent. Dorothy seemed under the impression that James was still financially well off, leading her to mistakenly believe in his abundance. Realizing the impracticality of their situation, I urged them to consider canceling the lease and discussing it with the real estate agent. Dorothy snapped back, dismissing my concerns. Frustrated, I hung up the phone, contemplating how James and Dorothy could provide a stable environment for raising a child. Ethan and I had recently moved into an apartment in a convenient neighborhood close to my workplace, creating a comfortable living environment. About a month after my divorce, James and Dorothy unexpectedly showed up at my workplace, causing a scene at the company's entrance and demanding to see the boss, which was me. I, who was out for lunch with Ethan at a family restaurant, was taken aback when I returned with him, only to find Dorothy and James causing a commotion at the reception. The child care center inside the company allowed me to have Ethan close even at work. The sudden appearance of James and Dorothy left me bewildered, especially since I had been waiting for a response to a meeting arranged by their lawyers. Dorothy, with tears that seemed more manipulative than genuine, pleaded with me, "Susan, can't you just come back home? I understand you are the one providing financially, but enough with this soul killing. It's time to put an end to this." It was clear that Dorothy believed her tearful act would work on anyone besides her son. She was intent on painting me as the villain in this situation. In response to Dorothy's pleas, James chimed in, "Hiring a lawyer? What were you thinking? This is a matter between us as a couple. Ethan would surely be happier with both his parents together." Despite his words, a father who prioritizes his mother over his own son only adds to the child's sorrow. Sighing deeply, weighed down by inner turmoil, I turned to James and said firmly yet calmly, "We're divorced. We're strangers now. If you have something to say, please do it through a lawyer." Upon hearing this, James seemed to realize that talking to me was futile. He turned to our son Ethan, who was standing beside his grandmother, and began speaking. "Hey Ethan, you'd prefer to stay with your dad and grandma, right?" James said, attempting to sway Ethan. "Absolutely, it must be lonely just with your mom always busy with work," added the grandmother, chiming in with her own persuasive tone. Ethan, seemingly frightened by this exchange, hid behind me and burst out crying loudly. "I don't like you both, you're mean." His pure tears were far more impactful than the grandmother's feigned weeping, resonating strongly with everyone around. Employees from nearby offices quickly gathered, responding to the commotion. They ushered James and the grandmother out of the company, restoring a semblance of order. Relieved at being freed from this distressing situation, I let out a sigh of relief. Later, through my lawyer, I warned them that if they ever showed up unannounced at my office or followed me and Ethan, I would consult the police. This warning seemed to calm them down. James and his mother, who were previously living in a house costing $4,000 in rent, had to let go of their luxurious lifestyle and move into a modest apartment. But the real tragedy for James was just beginning. He had been boasting to his colleagues about living in a lavish house, and now, terrified of them discovering his downgrade to a humble apartment, he quit his job without consulting his mother. This abrupt decision infuriated his mother. Eventually, they both had to start working out of necessity. Despite their new jobs, they spent their days blaming each other for losing Ethan, engaging in bitter arguments, and struggling to pay child support while trying to make ends meet. It was a challenging situation for them. As for me, I've been doing well in my job, and despite the absence of a father, Ethan has grown into a sturdy and reliable young man. In my heart, I always believed that even without such an unreliable father figure, I was capable of raising this child admirably.
My name is Alice, and I'm 28 years old. I work with kids. I recently got engaged to my boyfriend Tom. This is my first time visiting his parents' house. Tom went to a really good university and has a cool job at a big company. He's super smart, and everyone respects him at work. I've always looked up to him. His dad seems happy about us getting married and even mentioned how they've never had a daughter and his wife will be excited. But I noticed that Tom's mom, who was sitting next to him, didn't seem too happy. It's been bothering me. She looked like she was mad, her face all scrunched up. Then out of nowhere, she asks, "I heard you didn't finish high school, is that true? Our Tom is top-notch, graduated from a big shot university. Do you really think I'd be okay with him marrying someone like you?" Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Mom, that's really uncalled for." "You're being mean to Alice," I said, defending my fiancé. "Yeah, Mom, what matters is how we feel about each other," Tom chimed in. Both Tom and his dad had my back, but it only seemed to make her angrier. Isn't it normal for a mom to care about who her son is marrying? Kids take after their moms, right? "I want the best for my family," she argued, not backing down. It seemed like she wasn't going to accept me, a high school dropout, because she wanted the best for her kids. Some people really care about what degrees you have, and parents often value education a lot. It felt really disheartening to be judged just because I didn't finish high school. But there's more to my story. I didn't drop out for no reason. After my dad died in a car crash, my mom struggled to take care of me and my twin sister, Emma. I had to step up and start working after middle school to help out. Now, I'm going to night school to get my diploma. I'm also saving up money, and I might even go to college someday. Tom is totally on board with this plan and has offered to pitch in for my college expenses. He understands where I'm coming from, and he's always been supportive. It's one of the reasons I fell for him. But it seems like my future mother-in-law isn't too happy about it. Tom doesn't have any siblings, so we'll be moving in with his parents eventually. I'm a bit anxious about how that's going to work out. A while later, I moved into their house with only a month left until our wedding. As the big day got closer, I had to make frequent trips to the venue for final checks and arrange hotels for our out-of-town guests. Between work, school, and wedding planning, I was swamped. But my mother-in-law didn't seem too happy with how I was handling things. Today, as I was putting on makeup to go to the venue, she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what are you wearing?" She couldn't help commenting on my outfit. "I'm getting ready to go to the venue, so I wanted to look nice," I explained. Whether she was unhappy with me dressing up for the occasion or just looking for an excuse to criticize me, I couldn't tell. You say you're going to the venue, but you're dressed like that just to catch some attention, aren't you? You should be more careful," she remarked. She just assumed I was meeting up with a guy instead of going to the venue. I was stunned. I assured her I was meeting Tom at the venue and suggested she ask him if she had doubts. But she wouldn't listen and insisted I was meeting someone else. Then, out of nowhere, she messed up my carefully styled hair. "What are you doing, Mom?" "I spent ages on my hair. Now it's ruined," I protested. With my hair all messy, I couldn't leave like that, so I had to fix it. But instead of apologizing, she said, "Don't bother fixing it. This messy look suits a dropout like you. You should wear it like this for the wedding." I was already running late, so I quickly fixed my hair and headed to the venue, where Tom was waiting. He noticed something was off with me, but I didn't want to bring up what happened with his mom before discussing the ceremony, so I kept quiet about what happened with Tom for now. Then, as the wedding day drew closer, my mother-in-law surprised us with a suggestion. "Hey, doesn't Alice's mom live far away? It must be hard for her to come and stay in a hotel. Why not have her stay with us?" Tom and I were taken aback by her sudden offer. It seemed like a good idea to save money on hotel bills and help our families bond. Tom thought I should talk to my mom about it, so I did. My mom was thrilled with the idea, and we decided to bring my twin sister, Emma, along too. At first, I thought my mother-in-law was being kind, but I had no idea what she would do next. The day before the wedding, my mom and sister arrived to stay at my in-laws' house. Seeing my mom and sister, who I hadn't seen in ages, brought me so much joy. My bond with my sister is super tight, and we were thrilled to be together again. We decided to share a room for the night. Emma, who had a bit to drink, was out like a light as soon as she hit the pillow. "Once she's out, I chuckled to myself. Just as I was thinking of hitting the hay too, I heard the door creak open. Wondering who it could be, I heard a loud buzzing noise and the sound of hair being shaved. "Now you won't be showing up at the ceremony tomorrow, will you? No me for hair on a dropout like you," my mother-in-law said. I was stunned. I quickly flipped on the lights and exclaimed, "Mother-in-law, what on earth are you doing?" The person in the bed suddenly sat up, surprising us both. "Huh? Mother-in-law, you've got the wrong person. I'm Alice," I clarified, realizing she mistook me for Emma. "I'm sorry, Mom, but it's not my hair. Emma and I are twins, and we look really similar," I clarified. But it wasn't me who got her hair shaved. It was my sister, Emma. "What? No way. Why didn't it happen to Alice?" My mother-in-law was clearly shocked, but Emma, who had a bit too much to drink, was fast asleep. When she wakes up and sees her shaved head in the morning, she'll definitely be furious. Emma's got a fiery temper, so it's pretty obvious she'll be mad as heck. "What are you going to do now, Mom?" "I can't cover for you," I admitted, feeling guilty. Maybe my mother-in-law left the room looking pale. The next morning, when Emma saw herself in the mirror and realized she was bald, she was both shocked and furious. Our mom, who was there, couldn't hold back her tears, and Tom looked really upset. "This is awful. Who could have done such a thing?" So I spilled the beans about what happened the previous day in front of everyone. I wondered how my mother-in-law would react when she woke up, but she wasn't around. My father-in-law told me she had mentioned going for an early morning walk and hadn't come back yet. I started to worry that she might have left, so I decided to tell our family everything and began looking for her. About 30 minutes later, a relative called to say they found her at a nearby convenience store, and my father-in-law went to get her. When she got back home, seemingly unaware of the search, she immediately started making excuses. "I didn't do anything wrong. It's all Alice's fault. She used the clippers herself and shaved Emma's hair while she was sleeping," she claimed, much to my surprise. My mother-in-law was trying to blame me for everything, which left me completely stunned. I couldn't hold back and retorted, "That's absurd. I didn't do anything wrong. Weren't you the one who entered the room yesterday? It's unbelievable that you're still lying." But she was adamant about not admitting her mistake. Then my father-in-law seemed to recall something and went outside, returning with something in his hand. "Alice, could this be the clipper?" As I looked at the clipper he held, it was unmistakably the one my mother-in-law used to shave off Emma's hair last night. "That's it. That's the clipper." But where was it? It turned out that the clipper originally belonged to my father-in-law, who always cared about his appearance and carried grooming tools with him. When they checked the car, where he kept his grooming tools, they found it had been rummaged through and the clipper was missing. "I always leave my car keys in the bedroom. If there's brown hair in this clipper, then it's clear your mom is the culprit," he stated as he began to disassemble the clipper. The clipper contained unmistakable brown hair, clearly from Emma. She must have hurriedly left in the dark and didn't properly clean up the hair, my mother-in-law admitted, dropping to her knees as she noticed the evidence. "Alice, it's all your fault. You, a dropout with no money, tricked intelligent Tom. I wanted you out of Tom's life at any cost," she'd accused, leaving me feeling disgusted by her selfishness. Emma, who was most affected by her actions, was furious. "I don't care about your excuses. What are you going to do about this? I can't go to the wedding like this," she demanded. Upon hearing Emma's distress, my father-in-law made a quick call. Luckily, a friend who was a hairstylist agreed to come over immediately with a wig. While this would temporarily solve Emma's hair dilemma, we couldn't just ignore what my mother-in-law had done. 30 minutes later, father-in-law's friend arrived with the wig, and Emma's hair looked lovely again. Initially, father-in-law contemplated shaving my mother-in-law's hair like he did with Emma, but he decided it wouldn't provide a sense of closure. Instead, he chose to confront my mother-in-law's wrongdoing in front of everyone. Among the guests invited were the landlords to whom my mother-in-law's parents had been indebted for generations. They had a good rapport with father-in-law, and news of this incident would undoubtedly affect my mother-in-law's parents' living situation. You see, these landlords, who were close friends of my in-laws, had been giving them a discounted rent. However, upon learning about my mother-in-law's actions, the landlord, known for his integrity, would likely revert the rent to its original rate or even consider eviction. My mother-in-law's parents, who are financially strained, would then have no choice but to seek refuge with my mother-in-law. However, Tom had previously mentioned that my mother-in-law didn't have a good relationship with her parents and wouldn't be willing to assist them. For my mother-in-law, having her parents move in would be the start of a living nightmare. "Wait, please. I'll be in deep trouble if you do that." "I'm sorry, it was all my fault," she pleaded. "I made a terrible mistake, and I'm deeply sorry, Emma. I'll compensate you for the damage. Please forgive me," my mother-in-law pleaded, repeatedly apologizing as she pressed her forehead against the floor. However, despite her apologies, Emma's hair couldn't magically grow back. After discussing it, we decided that my father-in-law and Tom would disclose my mother-in-law's actions. Emma had already agreed to this. Initially, my mother-in-law refused to attend the wedding and attempted to flee, but Emma and Tom prevented her from escaping. When we arrived at the venue, relatives who had been informed of the situation through messages approached us, looking extremely concerned. In front of our relatives, we exposed my mother-in-law's wrongdoing, and Emma bravely removed her wig to reveal her bald head. Everyone was shocked by Emma's appearance, especially the women, who expressed disbelief. For a woman, hair is often considered vital, so the sudden loss due to shaving was particularly distressing. Some people couldn't help but shed tears as they thought of Emma's ordeal. As expected, the landlord confronted my mother-in-law, asking if the accusations were true. Initially, she tried to deny it, but under pressure from my father-in-law, she eventually admitted her wrongdoing. The landlord, visibly angry, faced criticism from the women present as well. Throughout the ceremony, my usually spirited mother-in-law remained downcast. a stark contrast to her usual self. Despite this, the wedding proceeded smoothly, and we were blessed by the well wishes of many attendees. However, it became clear that we could no longer reside with my mother-in-law in that house. Therefore, we made the decision to move into our own apartment and start our life as a couple. Although my mother-in-law panicked at the thought of us leaving, pleading with us not to go, we knew we couldn't continue living with her. My father-in-law shared the same sentiment. He informed my mother-in-law that he intended to divorce her and asked her to vacate the premises. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law turned pale and clung to him, begging for reconsideration. She expressed concerns about where she would live, given her strained relationship with her own parents. She appeared visibly distressed, as if on the verge of collapsing. However, despite her pleas, we prioritized Emma's well-being. The fact that my own hair had been shaved off while I slept, mistaken for Emma, was a jarring realization. Despite my mother-in-law's persistent attempts to persuade us otherwise, my father-in-law contacted her parents and she reluctantly agreed to leave the house. Currently, my mother-in-law is residing with her estranged parents, where she appears to be tending to their needs. However, it seems her parents possess challenging personalities and my mother-in-law is feeling overwhelmed by their demands. Despite reaching out to us multiple times, expressing her desire for a fresh start, we have no intention of reconciling with her, so we've chosen to block her calls. Presently, my husband and I are enjoying a happy life alongside my father-in-law in his home. Recognizing that the house was quite outdated, we embarked on a renovation project together. My father-in-law constructed his dream study, my husband created a space to showcase his model figures, and I focused on installing a modern, state-of-the-art kitchen. Naturally, we also prepared a room for our future child, and now the three of us are residing comfortably. Emma's hair, which was shaved during the ordeal, has since grown into a stylish short haircut, receiving praise from her friends as a positive transformation. She often jokes about the incident with her friends, which stirs up conflicting emotions for me. Nonetheless, Emma occasionally visits our family home for sleepovers, which I eagerly anticipate. While challenges may arise in the future, I am confident that with our collective efforts, we can overcome them together. You're saying you can't go on the trip I planned. If you don't come, you're no longer family. It's common sense since you married my son, isn't it? I and my mother-in-law said to me, seeking agreement from Cody. I halted Cody, who seemed like he wanted to say something, and reluctantly consented to her proposal. Goodness, marrying someone so naive to the world is such a hassle. As long as you understand, if you don't come, it's divorce. I'll re-educate you from now on, she continued with her ridiculous remarks. I was sick of it, but little did I know, this would be the last trip with my in-laws. I'm Liliana, 32 years old, and I run an app development company. It's still a small venture, but I love my work, and every day is a joy. My husband, Cody, is 37, 5 years older than me, and works at a bank. Both of us are passionate about our work, often discussing it for hours until the early morning. Cody is very understanding of my work, and we share household chores. Despite being married for 4 years, we don't have kids yet, but we both like children and hope to have them someday. My family runs an auto parts factory founded by my dad. It's now managed by my brother, which gives me the freedom to pursue my dream of starting my own app company. Even though our industries differ, I often consult with my supportive brother and dad, making my family a significant pillar in my life. Cody's family runs a small factory, and as an only child, Cody was expected to take over. However, he chose banking instead, much to his parents' disappointment. There were valid reasons for his decision. Firstly, the factory wasn't thriving, and Andy, his father, was considering shutting it down. Running a small factory is tough nowadays. As a child, Cody often heard his father talking with bank employees over the phone. Once he met a kind and cool banker during a visit to the factory and started accompanying his father to the bank for meetings just to meet him. Eventually, Cody aspired to be a banker, studied hard, and now works at a major bank. Our marriage seems fine on the surface, but it's not going well. Faye doesn't think highly of my job since I can work remotely. There are days I work from home, but she sees it as a frivolous job and doesn't understand it at all. I get it. For an older generation like our parents, my job is hard to grasp. It's not physically demanding, but it's still work, and it can be exhausting. I always adjust my work schedule around the in-laws' plans so I never inconvenience them. I don't insist on them understanding, but it's frustrating when they think remote work is easy just because I have a flexible schedule. There are other things Effie disapproves of about us. We built our house when we got married, located about halfway between our parents' homes. Despite taking different routes, it takes less than 30 minutes to reach either house. As a dual income couple, we manage our spending and savings separately. We value our independence and privacy, even as a couple. We contribute a fixed amount for living expenses every month, save the rest for the house, and manage our own money. Otherwise, Effie disapproves of this lifestyle too. She thinks it's wrong for a couple to talk about privacy. According to her, it's odd for family members to have secrets, and she doesn't consider them a true family. I think because Effie doesn't like me, she finds fault in everything I do. She adores her son Cody, so I'm just a nuisance to her. Every time we meet, she makes snide remarks about us not having children yet. It's something I'm sensitive about, and I'd rather not be reminded. Childbearing is a delicate topic, and usually it's polite to avoid it, but Effie brings it up every time, so I've started to avoid her to not worry Cody. I've been staying late at work on purpose to avoid meeting her. Effie has done many other surprising things, but there was one incident I couldn't forgive. It happened on the day of my best friend's wedding. After her wedding, my friend was moving abroad, and we wouldn't be able to meet as often since we both work. I was really looking forward to celebrating her big day. However, a week before the wedding, Andy came to me with a request. He had an important business reception and wanted me there. I naturally refused. The only thing more important than my friend's wedding would be a parent on their deathbed. That night, something unexpected happened. When I got home from work, my in-laws were at our house. As soon as she saw me, Effie confronted me angrily. Liliana, what are you thinking? Refusing Andy's request is outrageous. You're my son's wife. It's only natural to prioritize family obligations. Your refusal is unacceptable. You need to rethink your priorities, she yelled at me. Cody was there too, but he said nothing. After asking, I found out the reception was critical for the future of the company. But to me, my best friend's wedding was just as important. I told Effie that I understand what you both are saying, but my best friend's wedding is an important event for me, and I don't want to miss it. Besides, I'm not even an employee of Andy's company. As I said this, even Cody chimed in. Can't you make an exception this time? This is really about the survival of the company. I'm going to, and it's a family effort. We can make it up to you for missing the wedding. It's a family crisis. Can't you help us? I was shocked. I never thought Cody would say such a thing. He knew how much I was looking forward to the wedding. Then Andy spoke. I understood Liliana's point, but this time, we really needed her help. The atmosphere made it hard for me to refuse. It wasn't just any reception. In the end, I reluctantly agreed to skip my best friend's wedding. I told my friend the truth and explained why I couldn't come. Given that I had previously talked to my best friend about my family situation, she understood my predicament. In fact, she was more concerned about me. I'm fortunate to have such a kind friend. I felt guilty for missing her big day, but once the decision was made, I had to focus on making the reception a success. On the day of the event, Cody and I arrived at the venue early and tried to contact Effie. However, for some reason, Effie didn't answer her phone. As I worried about what to do, the in-laws finally arrived at the venue just 10 minutes before it was set to start. To my surprise, they were in a disheveled state, with messy hair and their suits and shirts all wrinkled. I was shocked and asked Effie what happened. What's with your shirt? Today is an important reception, right? She awkwardly responded. I just overslept, Liliana. Make sure you're not rude. I was so close to snapping back with, I don't want to hear that from you, but somehow I managed to hold back. I really want to give myself credit for keeping my composure during the reception. Effie, not knowing how to converse properly, made a series of rude comments to our guests. It seemed she meant them as jokes, but their strained smiles made it clear they weren't received well. As expected, we didn't secure the contract, and the reception ended without success. I thought to myself that it was to be expected. If I had known it would be like this, I would have preferred to go to my best friend's wedding. I was infuriated at being dragged into such a disastrous reception, ruining my plans and causing issues with the in-laws. To my dismay, they didn't acknowledge any wrongdoing. According to them, after such a lavish reception with no contract, it's almost like dealing with con artists. Good thing we didn't make a deal with such strange people. I was speechless with astonishment. How can they be so blissfully unaware? After this incident, I became even more uncomfortable with my in-laws and started avoiding them. But unfortunately, there's something I can't avoid. Cody's family has a tradition of going on a family trip every year since his childhood, and it has continued even after we got married. Since our marriage, I've been expected to join these trips, but I'm always stuck with the chores and driving, arranging hotels, booking, researching tourist spots. All these tedious tasks are my responsibility, and if I dare to voice my opinion, I'm immediately shut down with "don't overstep." Even when we visit tourist spots, I'm often left to stay in the room, never getting to visit places I like. Honestly, I dread these annual family trips and always hope I might fall ill on the day. Now, this year's trip season has arrived. Despite their claims of being financially tight, my in-laws insist on a lavish trip as usual. I was tasked with finding the hotel. I planned meticulously to keep Effie, who's always complaining, in a good mood. Since I'm the only one who doesn't drink, I'm the default driver, but I don't mind as it spares me from their conversations. However, a crisis occurred just before the trip. I received news that my mom had collapsed and was in critical condition. In such a situation, going on a trip, even a short one, was out of the question. I lost my composure, thinking I needed to see my mom as soon as possible. It was the day before the trip, so I decided to cancel and started preparing to go to the hospital. Cody offered to come to the hospital with me, but I refused. I felt like he was implying my mom wouldn't make it, which I didn't want to hear. When Cody and I went to tell Effie we couldn't join the trip, she exploded in anger. "You're saying you can't go on the trip I planned. If you don't come, you're no longer family. As my son's wife, it's common sense to prioritize the family trip, right?" "Right, Cody?" Effie said, seeking agreement from Cody. Effie interrupted Cody, who looked like he wanted to say something, as if to say she wouldn't entertain any opposing opinions. In that situation, I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't find the words to speak. Nothing could be more important than being with my mom in her critical condition. Just as I was about to respond, my brother called. "It seems mom's condition is serious but a bit stable." I expressed my desire to rush to her, but he said visiting isn't possible right now due to a contagious disease outbreak. He mentioned that if she recovers, we could arrange a short visit later, so there was no point in coming immediately. Hearing this, I hesitated about what to do. Noticing my indecision, my brother asked what was wrong. I honestly explained the situation about the trip and my current dilemma to my brother. A bit angry, he made a good suggestion I hadn't thought of in my distress. The trip destination was near my parents' home. He assured me that I could quickly get to my family's house from the hotel if needed, and there shouldn't be any problem. Indeed, that's true. If I can't visit the hospital, staying at home or at the hotel doesn't make much difference. Accepting my brother's suggestion, I told Effie, "All right, I'll go on the trip." Effie responded, "Goodness, if you had said that from the start, I wouldn't have had to get angry. It's hard to marry someone so naive. As long as you understand, if you don't come, it's divorce. Honestly, I'll have to re-educate you from now on." Cody looked surprised, but we agreed to go on the condition that I could leave for the hospital if needed. He remarked, "It would be trouble if our driver suddenly disappeared, right?" "Oh, good, you're part of this family now, so our needs come first. Remember your role as my son's wife. This is a major event. The family trip should be your top priority." Her triumphant attitude and obvious excitement really irked me, but to avoid further trouble, I decided to endure it. On the day of the trip, I was so worried about mom that I couldn't put down my phone. Yet Effie was drinking beer from the morning. The back seat of my car, which I was driving, turned into a party scene. I was surprised to see Cody joining in the drinking. However, this was a trip for which everyone had rearranged their schedules. I told myself that it would be nice if everyone could enjoy the trip since we had all made the effort to come. During the trip, Effie's whims were relentless demands to stop for the bathroom immediately or to go to the grocery store for more alcohol. I felt like a servant, but I was prepared to endure such things. That's when my mobile phone rang. It was a call from my brother, thankfully informing me that mom had survived. Her condition had stabilized and she had regained consciousness. The diagnosis was subarachnoid hemorrhage. However, I couldn't be completely at ease yet. There were concerns about potential after effects. It was reassuring to have my brother keeping me updated as I was feeling anxious. When I shared the news of mom's recovery with my in-laws, Effie commented, "If she's better, there's no need to bother us with such news. You're making a big deal out of nothing." And then Andy added, "Exactly, no need to spoil our trip with such grim news. We're supposed to be enjoying ourselves." I was disgusted that Andy shared Effie's view and didn't want to think of these people as my family. During the trip, they made a ruckus in the hotel, drinking and partying, which was truly embarrassing. This incident deepened my distrust of my in-laws. Thankfully, Mom's condition remained stable, and there was no need to rush to the hospital, allowing us to complete the trip and return home. I was relieved. While I was sorting out the laundry, Effie came to our house. Wondering what it could be this time, she said, "You have a dryer at your house, right? We don't have one, so let me use it," and showed up with loads of laundry. I was exasperated and replied, "There's a laundromat with dryers. I have a load of laundry of my own, and I'm using it right now, so it's not possible." To which she retorted, always so stingy, "Once you're done, it's fine. I'll come to pick it up tomorrow. Leave it finished by then," and attempted to leave her laundry in our washroom. Cody stepped in. "Go to a laundromat. Liliana is tired, and she has to work tomorrow. It's not possible." Effie got angry, feeling her son was defending me. She left in a hurry, spewing insults and slamming the door, leaving the laundry behind. In hindsight, if things had been different that day, maybe the course of events would have changed. Later, Effie returned and said, "During the trip, I realized something, Liliana. You lack awareness of being married to Cody. We might face similar situations in the future." Since we couldn't discuss it, I've decided that Liliana should make a decision. She put a family contract and divorce papers on the table. I was speechless. What even is a family contract? It was ridiculous and confirmed my belief that she can't have a normal conversation. The saving grace was Cody's reaction. He said, "I have something to say. If you keep imposing your biased views on us, I'll cut ties. I can't deal with this anymore." "What do you think, Liliana? She's not your servant or housekeeper. You're the one who's mistaken about your position." Effie was stunned. Until now, Cody had hardly ever opposed anything. It wasn't because he agreed with Effie's ideas, but rather he kept quiet to avoid the hassle. Following Cody's words, Effie's anger turned towards me. "You've changed Cody since marrying him. He used to be so sweet. It's crazy for him to talk to me like that. You must have brainwashed him. Turn him back to the old Cody," she accused, confronting me. She believed I had supposedly brainwashed Cody into defying her. But then Cody spoke up for me. "The one doing the brainwashing is you, right? Always going on a rampage without listening to anyone's opinion. Frankly, you're a toxic parent. You never let me do what I wanted to after getting married. Instead of calming down, you started spewing your venom at Liliana. Enough is enough. I'm not going to divorce, and if you have a problem, you should stay out of our lives," Cody said. Hearing this, Effie turned to Andy, who was with her, and burst into tears. Andy responded, "If that's what Cody thinks, then fine. We'll cut ties, do whatever you want," and stormed out. I was surprised but happy that Cody stood up for us like that. Feeling frustrated, I told my brother about this. He became furious, saying he couldn't stay silent if they were acting this way. He decided to take action. It led to a tragedy in the in-laws' family. Turns out, my brother's company was a client of my in-laws' company. We had kept our family's company name a secret to avoid creating a power imbalance. The in-laws had no idea they were dealing with my family's company. But with things as they were, we couldn't continue like this. Though I had been patient, avoiding mixing business and personal matters, it had reached its limit. My brother had been having issues with them not meeting deadlines. "You can't cherish those who don't cherish you," he said. I discussed it with Cody before talking to the in-laws, and he agreed. Cody also said he had had enough. My brother ended the contract with the in-laws company. It was a business decision. They had been a problematic company, not paying on time and missing deadlines. But we had tolerated it because it was Cody's family's business. But there was no longer a need for that. Later, when my in-laws found out about this, they came to us in tears. Now they're constantly apologizing. They pleaded with my brother to reconsider the contract, but of course, that was impossible. It was their responsibility for not meeting deadlines. They should have been grateful for our patience. Cody explained everything to his parents, but they refused to accept it and ended up cutting ties in a rage. Cody wasn't sad. He felt relieved. He had been torn and tired, struggling between us and his family. Since then, we've been living peacefully. I learned that Cody had been supporting his family financially, but he stopped that. Now the in-laws' factory went bankrupt. Even without this incident, it was on the brink of closure, drowning in debt. I heard that Cody had been paying for those annual trips, and it's astonishing how they could behave that way. using someone else's money. Now the in-laws are living modestly, and Effie has recently started working. I was honestly surprised to see her, who used to call herself a president's wife, working. One day I saw Effie being scolded while doing a cleaning job. I felt bad for thinking this was karma. She'll learn the harsh realities of society and hopefully straighten out. As for us, work is going well. We haven't had children yet, but we enjoy our jobs and life is fulfilling. We're planning an overseas trip for our next vacation. For a while, we're thinking of enjoying life without children.
I spent $200,000. Kenny, who didn't even come to my mom's funeral, had suddenly flown overseas. $200,000. What did you do with all that money? Remember our nice piano at home? I sold the dude. Being from a rich family has its perks. It was a good piano. I never thought it would sell for $200,000. Kenny thought the piano at home was his, but he was wrong. My condolences. I get all the inheritance from the family estate. But that piano was actually bought by our grandpa for my brother, so it's still his. My brother loves that piano and teaches piano now. He left it at our house because it's too big for his place. If my brother finds out we sold it without asking him, he'll be really mad. Just giving him money won't fix it. When I told Kenny this, he hung up right away. Hi, I'm Rachel Schneider, a 45-year-old office worker. My family has a long history tracing back to colonial times and is quite prominent in our community. Thanks to my late father's successful business, we now possess assets worth $9 million. Originally, my older brother was set to inherit the family estate, but he chose love over inheritance, opting to forego his rights to marry his girlfriend, who needed an heir for her family's wealth. This decision left me with the task of finding a spouse to carry on our family name. Despite my desire for independence and reluctance to rely on family wealth, I focused solely on my career, and before I knew it, I was in my mid-40s and still single. Realizing the urgency of continuing our family line, I decided to take action and attended a singles mixer. It was there that I met Kenny, my current husband. Surprisingly, he's 10 years younger than me, but at the event, he showed no interest in the younger women and approached me directly. I'm not sure if you're okay with someone my age, I asked him multiple times. But Kenny gazed into my eyes and replied, I'm a bit shy and not very assertive. I've always been attracted to older, more grounded women. Kenny's demeanor matched his words, gentle and reserved. I sensed he could bring a sense of calm to my family, which tends to be assertive. As our relationship blossomed, there was something important I needed to share with him. My mother had been ill and bedridden for the past year, and my sister-in-law, Catherine, and I were taking turns caring for her. Considering our age and the prospect of marriage, I struggled with how to reveal this to Kenny. Eventually, on our third date, I mustered the courage to tell him. To my relief, he not only accepted but also proposed, expressing his willingness to assist with caregiving. His kindness deeply moved me. At least, that's how I initially felt. Kenny works as a daycare teacher, but just 4 months into our marriage, he expressed a sudden desire to quit his job. When I inquired about the reason, he wore a remorseful expression and said, Sorry, Rachel. The parents at the daycare are too demanding and complain a lot. I can't handle it anymore. It was evident that Kenny was struggling, appearing so timid. Normally, I would have encouraged him to persevere, but with him assisting in my mother's care and my pregnancy progressing, I remained silent. However, I soon began to regret my leniency. One day, as I exited the shower and approached the bedroom, I overheard Kenny whispering on the phone. What I heard left me shocked and unsettled. I managed to tie the knot without her suspecting a thing. I'm jobless. She bought my story about quitting work hook, line, and sinker. Little does she know, I ditched that job 2 years back. His conversation seemed directed at a friend on the other end of the line. A faint male voice responded, You're quite the operator. Rachel's family is loaded, so I thought I hit the jackpot when I met her at that singles event. But let's face it, given her age, I was probably her only option. I felt duped. Was the sweet Kenny I fell for all an act? I wanted to confront him right then and there, but the thought of the baby stopped me cold. With Kenny's true colors revealed, I began to doubt our future. Today, Catherine will be looking after my mom until 5 o'clock p.m. Then it's my turn. I debated whether to confide in someone about Kenny. That's when my brother's wife, Catherine, approached me. Rachel, you seem troubled. If there's anything on your mind, feel free to share, Catherine said, her kindness evident, having cared for her own mother for years and now mine. She's really good with Mom, too. So I confided in her about Kenny, and she listened attentively. It's good you opened up. Keeping it to yourself could harm your unborn child, she reassured me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Talking won't solve everything, but it does lighten the load. Still, this situation is quite something. Catherine looked genuinely concerned, almost as if it were her own problem. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and Kenny walked in without waiting for an answer. Both of us were surprised, but Kenny acted as if nothing was wrong and smiled. Rachel, I'll be helping with your mom's care from now on. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you to strain yourself, Kenny said, playing the gentleman in front of me. Really? Okay, let me show you how to care for her. No, I'll learn from Catherine. You just rest at home. Well, my brother's coming home early today, so we won't need her help. Upon hearing that, Catherine looked at me, shaking her head, as if to say, it's okay. She might confront Kenny and get the full story once I'm gone. With that in mind, I decided to leave it to her and head home. But I couldn't shake my worry, so I pretended to leave but hid nearby. Catherine tried to start a conversation with Kenny, but he beat her to it. I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house? He asked, using the same tone as on the phone. Well, my husband's busy, and Rachel has her job. But more importantly, why you ask? Then Kenny interrupted. What? And began hurling insults at Catherine. You live in such a wealthy home. You'd have enough money to put your mother-in-law in a care facility, wouldn't you? Or is it something else? Did your husband give up his claim to this family's wealth? So you're trying to curry favor by taking care of her? That must be it. You'd be pretty upset if you married into money and didn't get a piece of the inheritance, wouldn't you? It was cruel. I was furious too, ready to leave the room. But just as I was about to, Catherine, noticing me, signaled with her eyes to stay put. Reluctantly, I remained silent and watched the scene unfold. You've hit a nerve, haven't you? If that's the case, leave right now. This family's wealth belongs to my wife and me, so I'll handle my mother-in-law's care alone from now on. With Kenny's stern declaration, Catherine felt it was pointless to argue further and left the scene. Sensing the tension, I discreetly stepped outside, concerned about Catherine's feelings and wondering how to apologize to her. Kenny took over Mom's care entirely, refusing any assistance from me. He only provided basic instructions on caregiving. But his neglectful approach led to tragic consequences, and our mother passed away. The funeral took place at the church where generations of our family had been laid to rest. However, Kenny was nowhere to be found from the moment Mom passed away. Despite my attempts to locate him, I was too overwhelmed with funeral arrangements to pursue the matter. Relatives and neighbors were puzzled by his absence. Catherine, grief-stricken at the altar, apologized for trusting Kenny with Mom's care. Approaching her, I tried to offer some comfort. Catherine, please don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. Rachel, it's not your fault either. But where is that man? I wanted to confront him today, and he disappears just as Mom passes away. Exactly. And didn't Kenny often leave the house while he was supposed to be caring for Mom? Where was he going? Yes, neighbors mentioned he was frequently out, almost as if he wasn't caregiving at all, just loafing around. They also mentioned a big truck that came by once. What was that about? I wanted to ask, but with the funeral, I didn't bring it up. Days passed, and Kenny still hadn't returned. Then, I received a call from him. Hey, Rachel, I'm in a fancy hotel in Europe, like the ones you see on TV travel shows, Kenny said nonchalantly. Kenny, you missed Mom's funeral, and now this. I spent $200,000. $200,000? Where did you get that kind of money? Remember the grand piano at our family home? I sold it. Who knew it was worth $200,000? Kenny confessed to selling the family's cherished grand piano and squandering the money on luxury travel in Europe. I never imagined Kenny would pull something like this while supposed to be caring for Mom. Our family home had tight security, but with family, it's different. That truck must have been there to move the piano. Why would you do something so selfish? The whole family was worried about you missing the funeral. Well, once you have a kid, you won't have much free time. Since you have a job, I guess I'll have to be the stay-at-home dad. Kenny's words left me stunned. Despite my anger, his willingness to take on childcare was a silver lining. But it seemed he was aiming to live off me. Additionally, Kenny seemed to think the piano belonged to me. Confronting Kenny, who had unknowingly sold a piano and spent the money, I started with, "My condolences." Huh. What do you mean? Kenny seemed bewildered, so I explained about the piano. That piano belonged to my grandfather, bought for my brother. So it still belongs to him. Oh, really? I'll just apologize to your brother then, Kenny replied, lacking any remorse for selling someone else's property. Kenny only met my brother at our wedding, so it's understandable he didn't know. My brother is a piano teacher and has loved the piano since childhood. He begged our grandfather for that specific piano. Although there's no room for it in his house now, it's still his. He even dreams of starting his own school with it. The piano means everything to him. I can only imagine what punishment he'll have for you when he hears it was sold without permission. By the way, my brother despises dishonesty. As I explained, Kenny remained silent. Understand? Mere compensation won't suffice when he finds out you sold his beloved piano. He's not one to compromise. I wonder what punishment awaits you. Without warning, the call abruptly ended. He's probably regretting it now. I called my brother and told him everything. Needless to say, he was furious. The next day, Kenny rushed home, finding everyone gathered in the living room. "What's going on? Why is everyone here?" Kenny asked nervously. "I heard everything from Rachel," my brother said sternly. "What possessed you to sell someone else's property, especially something so valuable, without consulting the family?" Kenny tried to justify himself, visibly shaken. I was just trying to pitch in with the household chores out of boredom. When I saw the old, large grand piano, I figured no one was using it anymore. So you decided to sell it. Yeah, it seemed like a waste to just leave it there. My brother, wearing a stern expression, pressed further. Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale? As anticipated, my brother was playing his part well. Everyone probably knew Kenny had spent all the money on an overseas trip, but my brother was aiming for a confession in front of everyone. Kenny seemed lost in thought, struggling to come up with an excuse. The sales money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet. Kenny stammered, clearly flustered, but my brother wasn't buying it. You're lying? How deceitful can you get? And what about those souvenirs from Europe in that huge suitcase? Kenny recoiled as if struck by lightning, closing his eyes in shame. I'm sorry, I spent all the money. Kenny's admission left the relatives murmuring in shock. Everyone knew the value of that grand piano. They couldn't fathom how Kenny could blow $200,000 on just one trip overseas. My brother, looking down at Kenny, lifted his chin with his hand, locking eyes with him as he said, "As Rachel probably told you, that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you'll repay every penny. If you can't, I'll sue you for theft. Are we clear?" My brother's intensity was palpable, almost resembling a mob boss. While this would typically be a family matter, my brother was likely using intimidation tactics, knowing Kenny was clueless about the law. Predictably, Kenny lost his voice and began sweating profusely. Then, with a terrified glance at me, he pleaded, "Rachel, please help me." His voice was desperate, but I had no intention of intervening. This mess was entirely of his own making. When I rejected his plea, Kenny resorted to a ludicrous argument, saying, "Don't be so cold. I looked after your mom while you were pregnant. I saw the trip as a reward for myself after caregiving. Let's just say we both agreed to sell the piano this way. Since we're siblings, it can't be considered theft, right?" I was so dumbfounded that my mouth hung open, unable to form a response. It was Catherine who stepped in to defend me. "That's enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to assist with caregiving? You even accused me of being after the inheritance and tried to push me away. Kenny, did you say such awful things to my wife too?" "Yes. I didn't want to worry you, so I kept quiet. But this man must have been scheming to sell the piano without letting Rachel and me near the family home." Catherine's words resonated with me, remembering how Kenny prevented me from getting close to the family home when he said he'd handle our parents alone. I reached the same conclusion. My brother's anger flared up once more. "Listen closely. My wife cared for Mom because she wanted her to stay out of a facility. She agreed out of kindness, not for money. First, apologize to my wife right now." With my brother grabbing Kenny by the collar, tears welled up in Kenny's eyes as he knelt before Catherine. "I'm so sorry, Catherine." Kenny's apology for his disrespectful behavior towards Catherine didn't soften the cold gazes of the relatives. Then, one of them shouted at Kenny, "You need to repay the money from the piano sale promptly. We can't tolerate a criminal in the Schneider family. It'll stain our name." Misinterpreting the situation once more, Kenny made another peculiar remark. "Exactly. We can't have a criminal in the family, right, bro? So let's keep calm. We'll work together as a couple to repay the debt gradually." Even my uncle was left speechless by Kenny's illogical response. Feeling that further discussion would be futile, I excused myself to retrieve something from my room. Ever since the phone incident, I had a divorce lawyer's business card ready. "Kenny, call this number. I want our marriage to end. Let's handle things through legal channels." Kenny's face drained of color when he saw the business card I handed him. "Why? We're expecting a baby. Why are you doing this?" At that moment, I disclosed what Kenny had said to everyone on the phone. "You heard that. It was just a joke. Do you think that's a valid excuse? I've known all along that you were after my inheritance." Everyone present glared at Kenny, realizing there was no way to justify his actions. Kenny responded with defiance, unwilling to admit his wrongdoing. "Rachel, please, I need your help," Kenny pleaded in desperation. He explained that the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it and get a refund. When Kenny had sold the piano, he claimed it was in perfect condition. However, upon inspection, the buyer discovered a large engraving on the back indicating my brother's ownership. It seemed Kenny hadn't checked thoroughly. Instead of selling it through a reputable dealer, he likely chose a shady one enticed by offers like completely free, and now he faced the consequences. Kenny had to refund $200,000 to the buyer, a significant sum considering his debt to my brother. Despite Kenny's attempt to file for bankruptcy, my brother and I took legal action to prevent it. Now, burdened with more debt, Kenny worked tirelessly in manual labor. Eventually, the heirloom grand piano was safely returned. Relieved, my brother secured it with a strong lock and installed a security camera in the room, exercising caution. "No one will touch that piano until I begin my piano lessons," my brother declared, unchanged from his childhood self, which brought a smile to my face. With his desire to start a piano school at our family home, I decided to discuss sharing our mother's inheritance. Feeling guilty for inheriting everything alone after Catherine's devoted care for our mother, I proposed the idea to my brother, who agreed. It ensured a positive relationship with his family in the future. And so, I welcomed a long-awaited baby girl. While some relatives hoped for an heir, I believe daughters tend to cherish their mothers longer in today's age. Besides, my mother, an only daughter herself, accepted a son-in-law, so if necessary, my daughter could do the same. Embracing single motherhood, I found unwavering support from Catherine, who had finished raising her own children. Grateful for her assistance during my mother's care, I felt deeply indebted to her. My brother eagerly volunteered to be a father figure for my daughter, his excitement palpable. Additionally, my brother and Catherine's two adult daughters, both kindergarten teachers, shared his passion for the piano, bonding with my daughter. Surrounded by such warmth and support, I felt immensely fortunate, and with gratitude, I resolved to face life's challenges head on with my daughter by my side.
Today is a big day for me because I'm at home, surrounded by walls full of memories. Jack is here too, looking so proud and happy. He's exploring the rooms with excitement, and I can't help but feel his energy rubbing off on me. We're in the main part of my family's house, the place where my dad's dreams came true. My dad worked really hard to make this place amazing, and now it's worth a whopping $100 million. It's like his legacy, something he left behind for me when he passed away. Now, without my dad by my side, my husband wants a piece of our family's legacy. He insists that what used to be mine alone should now belong to both of us. But I know better. I have proof. Papers with my name, Sarah, as the rightful owner. At 42, I work in the digital world thanks to my job at an online bank. This career wasn't just a whim, it was shaped by the values my parents taught me about money management. They showed me how important it is to be responsible with finances, lessons I still carry with me today. Growing up with money, my parents taught me to respect it and not take it for granted. Despite our wealth, they made sure I didn't grow up spoiled. My allowance was just like everyone else's, and we didn't eat fancy meals all the time. I went to a regular public school, not some fancy private one. But somehow, rumors about us being super rich spread anyway. People thought my life was all about luxury and fun because of our big house and money. Sarah, with your huge house and all your money, life must be easy, right? You must have all the cool gadgets and games. Can we come over and play? People often asked me these questions, thinking I had everything. But the truth was, my life wasn't as extravagant as they thought. I didn't have the newest toys or gaming consoles, but people still assumed I did. Sometimes it felt like everyone just wanted to be my friend because of my family's money. Sarah, you're rich, right? Can you lend me some money? People asking for money always made me uneasy. It felt like I didn't understand the values my parents taught me. Then, I got into a tough spot when I accidentally broke Maria's gaming console. I didn't have any money at that moment, which made things even worse. Around the same time, Julie and I became classmates. She asked if I had told my parents about the accident, but I was too scared of disappointing them to say anything. I can't tell them. They might get mad. That's why I'm asking you, Sarah, she confessed. Saying no felt awful, especially since I didn't want things to be awkward at school. But my parents were clear about not lending money, so I had to apologize to Julie and explain that I couldn't help. After I couldn't help Julie, she ended up crying. And soon rumors started flying around. People accused me of not helping a friend in need, even though my family was well off. I tried to explain that I didn't have any money to spare, but it didn't seem to matter. Then, Maria said something that really hurt. She suggested that I cared more about money than friendship. Things got worse when Maria and Julie started spreading lies, saying I owed them money and refused to pay for the broken console. The school found out the truth eventually and scolded Maria and Julie. But instead of stopping, the rumors got worse and even reached my parents. My dad decided to deal with it and organized a meeting with their families. Even though they said sorry, I decided to stay away from Maria and Julie after that. I still had to deal with their looks and whispers, but at least there were no more direct confrontations. During dinner that night, my dad shared advice that stuck with me for years. He said it's important to stand by your decisions, especially when it comes to money. Sarah, it's okay to say no, he said with a smile. You don't have to tell anyone about your finances. If someone keeps asking, just say you'll have to check with your parents, even if you know you can't lend money. This lesson about handling money matters gracefully and firmly became really important to me. As I grew up, I became more careful about who I let into my life, focusing on friendships based on character, not money. After university, I made sure to keep my work and personal life separate, avoiding any financial complications. This whole experience taught me the importance of setting boundaries in both friendships and finances, and it's shaped who I am today. When I was 35, I met Jack through a friend, and despite him being a bit younger, his genuine personality quickly won me over. We started casually dating, and before long, it turned into something serious. 2 years later, we had a beautiful wedding, which made my parents really happy. After we'd been married for about a month, my dad suggested that Jack come over to our house. I trusted Jack, but I was worried that he might accidentally reveal some private family stuff because he loves to talk. Still, after a month of marriage, I felt ready to let him in on everything about my family. So I invited him to visit my parents' house. Jack was amazed when he saw my family's house. His surprise was obvious, showing that he hadn't realized how well off my family was. Even though the visit went well, Jack couldn't stop asking about our money on the way home. I didn't know much about our finances myself, so his questions made me feel uneasy. A few months after we got married, my mom called to tell me that my dad was in the hospital. It was a shock, especially since I didn't know he was having health problems. Thinking back to our last visit, I remembered how he didn't seem well, and now I felt really worried and guilty. When I went to the hospital with my mom that Saturday, my dad tried to stay cheerful, but we could tell he was feeling down. He apologized for what he saw as a burden to us, showing his gentle nature. Then the doctors told us he had advanced pancreatic cancer, and it had spread too much for surgery. It was like a punch to the gut. We couldn't believe someone as health conscious as my dad could get so sick. After the diagnosis, my dad stayed strong. He just wanted us to be happy, which made us all tear up. I wanted to spend every moment with him, but hospital rules meant only close family could visit. He wished for our friends to be around to make happy memories at home, which reminded us of the life he wanted for us. So I promised to keep our home full of joy, even after he was gone. Keeping that promise became really important to me. I decided to renovate our family home, something to focus on during such a tough time. Jack, always caring, worried about how much I was doing for my dad, not realizing the other stuff I was dealing with, like our family's estate issues that I hadn't told him about. When Jack asked about my dad's health, I finally opened up to him about everything we were going through. It was a relief to have the support while juggling work, hospital visits, and all the emotions. However, things got tense when Jack started asking about my dad's money and the family estate. He even suggested getting legal advice, just in case something happened to my mom too. It brought up painful memories for me. My dad had a lawyer he trusted, but Jack's insistence on being cautious with money started causing problems between us. A few months later, my dad passed away after bravely battling his illness. Then, the discussions about inheritance started within the family. I ended up getting a big house worth $5.5 million. But Jack's growing interest in the inheritance, despite me trying to keep him out of it, made things even harder. He was excited about moving into the mansion and kept asking about financial stuff, which caught me off guard. I later found out he'd been talking to my cousin at the funeral, who mentioned how the house would be a waste if it stayed empty. That just made things more complicated. Despite my attempts to explain to Jack that the inheritance wasn't something we shared, he didn't seem to listen. Our relationship started getting more hostile because of it. Even though he was there at my dad's funeral, Jack didn't help out with the memorial services or the legal stuff that followed. As things started to settle down and life went on, Jack dropped a bombshell. He said he changed the ownership of my family home to his name, and he had legal papers to prove it. I was shocked and hurt. Not only did he break my trust, but it also showed a huge lack of respect for our relationship and the boundaries we had. Dealing with inheritance issues brought up bigger problems in our marriage. We had to rethink what we valued, how much we trusted each other, and where our relationship was headed. When Jack told me he changed the ownership of our family home without telling me, I was shocked and hurt. He said he was tired of our marriage and suggested we live together as roommates in the house, with him not giving me much financial support. He even threatened divorce if I didn't agree, which was a lot to take in on top of everything else. I begged him to think about what he was doing and why he made such a big decision without talking to me. He said he'd talked to a lawyer about changing the ownership without my permission. Things got so bad that divorce seemed like the only way out. I was heartbroken and lost, feeling like I had to distance myself from the home and life I'd shared with Jack. I couldn't understand why he'd do something like this, and it felt like money had changed and for the worse. The next day, Jack demanded the house keys, saying the house was his now. This just made things worse. He tried to get into the house, but security stopped him. I showed them the real ownership papers, proving the house was mine because of my dad. Seeing the proof, Jack was shocked. He trusted a guy named Jerry to help him with legal stuff, and Jerry had lied to him. Jack had even given Jerry $360,000 to change the ownership, but it turned out to be a scam. Jack was really upset. He kept trying to call Jerry, but Jerry wouldn't answer. Jack was mad at him for tricking him and taking his money. Then he turned his anger on me, saying I spent too much money on things he thought were unnecessary. He even questioned if I understood how inheritance stuff worked. Even though Jack tried to fix things and suggested we give our marriage another chance, the trust between us was too broken. I asked the security guard to help him leave, closing a painful chapter of my life. In the months that followed, I had time to think about everything that happened. It made me realize how important trust and honesty are in a relationship. What happened with Jack, all the lies and betrayal, taught me to be careful not to let money cloud my judgment. During my dad's first memorial service at our family temple, Jack showed up unexpectedly. Since our divorce, things hadn't been going well for him. He didn't have a job, he had money problems, and it seemed like the people he trusted had let him down. He looked really sad and lost, standing there in contrast to the solemn occasion. As he tearfully tried to apologize, his actions unintentionally disrupted the memorial, causing a commotion among my relatives. Despite his emotional distress, I had to ask him to leave, and security had to step in to make sure it happened. It was a difficult moment, especially during such a solemn occasion, leaving me with mixed emotions, but also a strong desire to move forward and leave our past behind. I decided it was time to leave my parents' home, something I'd been planning for a while. I found a new place to live, cutting ties with Jack for good. Meanwhile, Jack kept coming to the family property, which we had turned into a rental villa. My mom and I ran the villa together, turning it into a happy place for many people to visit and enjoy. On his side, Jack seemed to be trying to make positive changes. He got a new job and was really focused on starting over. Turning our family home into a rental villa not only honored my dad's vision, but also created a welcoming place for guests from all walks of life. The villa, known for its stunning views and beautiful garden, became really popular. We hosted all sorts of events there, from small weddings to big family parties. Working on it with my mom brought us even closer and made us really happy. As the villa became more successful, we decided to add more stuff to make it even better. We put in a swimming pool, a cozy outdoor lounge, and a fun area for kids to play. We were really committed to making sure our guests had an amazing time, and it paid off. The villa became a top spot for people looking for a peaceful getaway and unforgettable experiences. This whole project wasn't just about making money. It was about making my dad's dream come true and creating special memories for our guests. Taking care of the villa's garden filled me with a deep sense of happiness. Seeing our family home turned into a place where people could come together, have fun, and make lasting memories made me really proud. I could almost imagine my father looking down with pride at what we had accomplished, bringing his dream to life. This venture not only fulfilled his vision but also gave us financial stability and a sense of freedom. Along the way, I learned important lessons about trust, money, and the strength needed to forge my own path, separate from the challenges of the past. In this journey of self-discovery, I discovered that facing difficulties can actually make you stronger and more determined. I heard news about Jack from friends, and it seemed like he was turning his life around, finding a meaningful job and learning from his mistakes. Seeing his progress gave me a sense of peace, knowing that both of us were moving forward and growing. My father's dream became a driving force for growth, not just for me and my mom, but for everyone who visited the rental villa. It became a place of joy and celebration, a sanctuary where people could create lasting memories. The success of the villa is a testament to my father's vision, reminding us of the values of resilience and hard work. Through this venture, we've created more than just a place to stay. It's a source of happiness, a place for making memories, and proof that dreaming big and putting in the effort can lead to incredible things. Pack your things and get out of my son's house by Friday, or I'll have the sheriff remove you, my father-in-law Richard declared, standing in my doorway at 7 a.m. with what he thought was an eviction notice. I glanced at the paper in his hand, then at the actual deed to the house tucked in my desk drawer, and wondered if he'd forgotten that his precious son hadn't contributed a penny to this property. How would Richard's face change when he discovered who really owned every brick, every tile, every blade of grass he was so eager to claim? The morning had started like any other Tuesday, coffee brewing, news playing softly on the kitchen TV, my work laptop already open on the counter. Then Richard's pounding had shattered the peace, using the spare key I foolishly let him keep for emergencies. Apparently, his definition of emergency was very different from mine. "Good morning to you too, Richard," I said, tightening my robe. "Would you like some coffee before you attempt to illegally evict me from my own home?" His face flushed red, the same shade it turned during his infamous Thanksgiving rants about this generation's lack of respect. Behind him, I could see my neighbor Mrs. Patterson pretending to water her already drowning petunias, eager for the drama. "You're home," Richard scoffed, waving the paper like a weapon. "This is the Garrison family home, bought and paid for by Garrison money. And since my son has finally come to his senses about the sham of a marriage, it's time for you to go." Interesting. I leaned against the doorframe, studying the man who'd made my life miserable for 7 years. "And where exactly is your son during this grand eviction?" "Thailand," Richard said proudly, finding himself. "He'll be back when he's ready to reclaim his life." Thailand. Of course. Last I'd heard from mutual friends, Connor was finding himself at the bottom of many bottles and in the beds of many tourists. But in Richard's mind, his son was on some noble journey of self-discovery that would eventually lead him back to reclaim his rightful place without the inconvenient wife who'd never been good enough for the Garrison name. "Did Connor send you to do this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He doesn't know yet. It's a surprise for when he returns. I'm handling the family business as always." Family business, that's what Richard called his constant interference. The man who tried to veto our wedding venue for being too common, who'd insisted on adding his name to what he assumed were our joint accounts, who'd shown up to couples therapy to explain why I was wrong for his son. "Well, Richard, I appreciate your initiative, but there's a small problem with your plan." I stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. "Come in. Let's discuss this like adults." He hesitated, clearly not expecting civility. "No tricks, Jade. I have my lawyer on speed dial." "No tricks. Just facts. Please come in. Mrs. Patterson's petunias can only take so much water." He entered warily, his eyes scanning the foyer as if seeing it for the first time. The hardwood floors I personally restored, the chandelier I'd found at an estate sale and refurbished, the gallery wall of photos that, I noticed now, contained not a single picture of Connor from the last 2 years. "Can I see this eviction notice?" I asked, settling into my favorite armchair. He handed it over reluctantly. I read through it, biting back a laugh. He clearly printed this off some legal website, filling in the blanks with fiction. According to this document, Connor Garrison was the sole owner of the property, and I was a month-to-month tenant who'd violated some vague, moral conduct clause. "Richard, did you have a lawyer prepare this?" "I don't need a lawyer to remove a squatter from my son's house." "A squatter. After 7 years of marriage." "A failed marriage," he corrected. "Connor told me about your difficulties." "Our difficulties." Like Connor's gambling addiction that drained our savings. His 3 affairs that he'd blamed on my lack of spontaneity. His inability to hold a job for more than 6 months because every boss was too stupid to recognize his genius. Yes, we had difficulties, I agreed. Which is why we separated 8 months ago. Legally, with lawyers. Did Connor not mention that? Richard shifted uncomfortably. Separation isn't divorce. This is still his house. Is it though? I stood walking to my home office. "Follow me, Richard. I want to show you something." He followed reluctantly, probably expecting me to beg or cry, his version of how women should respond to authority. Instead, I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out a folder labeled House Important. "Let's start with the purchase agreement," I said, laying out the document. "Notice the date, 2 years before Connor and I met. Notice the buyer's name, Jade Winters, not Garrison. That's because I kept my maiden name, remember? You threw quite the tantrum at the rehearsal dinner about that." Richard's face was beginning to pale. "That's not," Connor said. "Here's the deed," I continued, laying out another document. "Sole owner, Jade Winters. No Connor Garrison anywhere on this paperwork. And here," I pulled out bank statements. "Are 5 years of mortgage payments, all from my personal account. The account Connor never had access to because, fun fact, I never actually added him to any of my financial assets. But he lived here. Marital property. Here's our prenuptial agreement." I placed it in front of him with satisfaction. The one you insisted on, remember? To protect Connor's future inheritance from his gold digger wife. Section 3, Paragraph B. All assets owned prior to marriage remain separate property. Your idea, your lawyer, your insistence. Ironic, isn't it? Richard sank into my desk chair without asking, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. Connor said the house was his. He's been telling everyone that he's a successful real estate developer, that he bought this place as an investment. Yes, I'm aware of his stories. Did he also tell you about the business he claimed to run from this address? The one that was actually me working from home as a financial consultant. You're lying. I pulled out my laptop, logging into the county assessor's website. Here's the public record. Anyone can look this up. Richard. Owner, Jade Winters. Purchase date, March 15th, 2016. No liens, no co-owners, no Connor. His hand shook as he reached for his phone. I need to call my lawyer. Good idea. While you do that, let me show you something else. I opened another folder. Divorce papers. Filed 6 weeks ago. Connor was served at his apartment. Yes, he has an apartment now. He signed them. We're just waiting for the final decree. Divorced? He didn't tell me. Because he's been too busy finding himself to talk to his father, or because he knew you'd ask about the house. I watched him dial, noting the tremor in his fingers. Ask your lawyer about trespassing laws while you're at it, and harassment, and attempted illegal eviction. Richard stood abruptly, phone to his ear, and walked to the window. I could hear him speaking in urgent whispers, lots of but he said, and that can't be right, and check again. While he argued with reality via his lawyer, I made myself coffee and sent a quick text to my own attorney. FIL showed up with fake eviction notice. Currently having meltdown in my office. May need restraining order. Her response was immediate. On it. Save all documentation. Recording. I glanced at the small security camera in the corner of my office, its red light steady. Always. Richard ended his call and turned to face me, looking 10 years older than when he'd arrived. My lawyer says. He says Connor lied. Connor lied about a lot of things, Richard. This is just the one that affects you. But why would he? I gave him money for the down payment, $50,000. My coffee mug paused halfway to my lips. When? 6 years ago. He said you two were buying a house together. He showed me pictures of this place. 6 years ago, a year after we married, when Connor had supposedly started his import/export business that mysteriously never imported or exported anything. Richard, I bought this house 8 years ago. Connor gave you pictures of my house and told you he was buying it. The old man slumped against the window. He said you were putting in half. Said it was a joint investment. I gave him the money for his half. And you never thought to verify, never asked to see paperwork. He's my son, Richard said quietly. I trusted him. For the first time since I'd met Richard Garrison, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Not much. The man had made my life hell for years, but enough to soften my voice. He's an addict, Richard. Gambling, primarily, but also the adrenaline of the con. He's been lying to everyone for years. You're the liar, he said, but without conviction. You turned him against me, against his family. His family enabled him. You've been cleaning up his messes since he was a child. The DUI you made disappear when he was 17. The plagiarism scandal at university that you paid to go away. The business partner he defrauded that you quietly settled with. Did you think it would stop? Those were mistakes. Young men make mistakes. Middle-aged men who've never faced consequences make disasters. I set down my coffee. Where do you think your $50,000 really went, Richard? His face crumpled. He had debts. Gambling debts. Said they'd hurt him if he didn't pay. And the $30,000 before that? For the investment opportunity? How did you? And the $20,000 for the medical emergency that wasn't. The $15,000 for the legal trouble that didn't exist. I pulled out one more folder. I've been documenting everything, Richard. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation. Not because I'm vindictive, but because I needed evidence for the divorce. And maybe deep down, because I knew this day would come. He sank back into the chair, the fight completely gone. Show me. For the next hour, I laid out the evidence of his son's systematic deception. The forged documents he used to get loans. the credit cards he'd opened in my name that I discovered and closed, the joint ventures that were nothing but Connor taking money from investors and gambling it away, the affairs funded by his father's investments in non-existent businesses. This is why I kept everything separate, I explained. Why I insisted on the prenup, not because I was planning to leave, but because I could see what he was. Maybe before you could. Or maybe I just didn't want to see, Richard admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. His mother always said I was too soft on him. Connor's mother had died when he was 12. Richard had tried to fill that void with money and blind faith. He needs help, Richard. Real help. Not another bailout or another excuse. Where is he really? Not Thailand. I pulled up Connor's Instagram on my phone. The latest post showed him at a casino in Macau, champagne in hand, surrounded by people who didn't know him well enough to see the desperation behind his smile. Gambling away someone else's money, I assume, Richard said flatly. Probably. The only reason he signed the divorce papers so easily was because I agreed not to pursue the identity theft charges if he stayed away. Identity theft. Did you wonder why I was so prepared for your visit today? This isn't the first time someone's tried to take my house. Connor attempted to forge my signature on a home equity loan 6 months ago. That's what finally made me file for divorce. Richard's phone rang. He looked at the screen and grimaced. Connor, are you going to answer? He hesitated, then declined the call. What would be the point? He's just calling for money. We sat in silence for a moment. The man who burst into my home with such self-righteous authority now looked deflated, sitting in my office surrounded by evidence of his son's betrayal. I owe you an apology, he said finally. Several, actually. Yes. Several. He looked around the office, really seeing it for the first time. You've done well for yourself, without any help from us. Despite active hindrance from you, you mean. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Fair point. I never gave you a chance, did I? You decided I wasn't good enough before you met me. Wrong family, wrong background, wrong career. The prenup was supposed to protect Connor from me, but it ended up protecting me from him. Ironic. Karmic, I'd say. Richard stood slowly, looking every day of his 70 years. I'll need to change the locks at my house. Cancel his credit cards. Contact my lawyer about everything. Get him into rehab first, I suggested. Real rehab, not the spa he went to last time. He's sick, Richard. This isn't just bad behavior anymore. If I can find him. He'll come to you when the money runs out. He always does. Richard picked up his fake eviction notice, crumpling it in his hands. I'm sorry about this. About all of it. 7 years of it. I survived. You did more than that. He gestured at the house around us. You thrived, in spite of us. Because of me, I corrected. My success was never about you or Connor. It was about building a life I could be proud of. He walked to the door, then paused. The divorce, is it final? 2 more weeks. Good. You deserve better than my son. The words seemed to physically pain him. I should have seen that years ago. After he left, I locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing myself to feel the exhaustion of the morning's drama. My phone buzzed with texts from my lawyer, my friends, my sister. Word traveled fast in our suburban neighborhood. But it was the email notification that made me smile. An offer on the house from the couple who'd viewed it last week, above asking price. I walked through the rooms I'd lovingly restored, remembering all the dreams I'd had when I bought this place. Some had come true. Others had shattered. But the foundation, my foundation, had held strong. Time for a new beginning. A new house without the ghosts of the Garrison family haunting every corner. Maybe something with a better security system and definitely without spare keys for anyone. I called my realtor. Accept the offer and start looking for something new. Something that's entirely mine. What about your husband? Ex-husband in 2 weeks, and he never lived here anyway, no matter what his father thought. That evening, as I packed the first box, I found our wedding photo tucked behind some books. Connor's smile was charming, confident, full of promise. Richard stood beside him, proud and protective. I'd been so young, so hopeful, so willing to believe that love could overcome fundamental character flaws. I tossed the photo in the trash, then thought better of it. Instead, I tucked it into the box labeled Lessons Learned. Someday, when the anger faded, I might want to remember. Not the pain, but the strength I'd found in surviving it. My phone rang. Richard. Connor called again, he said without preamble. He's in trouble. Wants to come home. And I told him the house was gone. That you owned it all along. That I knew everything. How did he react? He hung up. Richard paused. I think that's the first time I've ever told him no. It gets easier, I said. The first no is the hardest. Does it get easier? I looked around my house, at the life I built and protected, and was now ready to leave behind for something even better. Yes, I said. It really does. 2 weeks later, the divorce was final. A month after that, I closed on the sale of the house. Richard sent a certified check for $50,000 with a note. This was never Connor's to take. Use it for your new beginning. I donated it to a nonprofit that helped gambling addicts. The last I heard, Connor was in rehab, real rehab this time. Richard was in therapy, learning to set boundaries with his son. And I was in my new condo, with a view of the city and not a single garrison in sight. The doorman knew not to let anyone up without calling first. The deed was in my name only, and the locks? Those were mine too. Every single one.